Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the MEIEA Summit 2022. We're going to talk this afternoon about emerging topics in tech. We have some great panelists and some really interesting research that has been done. We're going to start with Ben Murphy. So, Ben, if you would join us, that would be awesome. Ben,
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're great. You're welcome. Glad you're here. But Ben is from Melbourne, and he is an associate lecturer at Box Hill Institute. And I'm going to kind of just put up the whole name of your research, Ben. And if I miss something, you can correct me. But it's an artistic framework for the adapting of existing works of electronic music to live performance. Did I get it all?
Yeah,
okay.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, I found your talk or your video really interesting. I won't start with the fact that you have a band, but I think that was really interesting too, that you were kind of basing this around some of the stuff your band does. But you set it up with the problems that you felt needed to be addressed. Do you want to share those with the audience?
Yeah. In brief, I guess. I work a lot with my own personal artistic craft of electronic music production and performance and that kind of thing, and also as an educator at Box Hill Institute. And I have found that electronic music and live performance is a kind of it's certainly been done for a long time now, but it's one of those kind of things that's like underexplored, under talked about, or and not something that always shows up in education programs very kind of neatly. There's not a lot of great amount of resources for it. It's not something that's very easy for artists to kind of like navigate themselves, because there's a wide variety of different examples out there. There's a wide variety of pieces of technology that are used. It's hard to kind of find obvious kind of paths to emulate and that kind of thing. So it's difficult for sort of artists to navigate figuring out how to like play shows essentially. Mm-hmm. And it's again something that doesn't seem very well kind of resourced in education, and often not kind of brought into the curriculum that electronic music producers kind of getting into sort of elements of performance. Certainly it does show up in some places, but again, something I felt, I guess, I could kind of explore more and contribute to.
Okay. And you said some of the problems were just that it wasn't real time, that it was non-real time.
So that's kind of the one of the biggest core conceits, is that a lot of electronic music production is made with non-real time processes, like editing and layering and refining and manipulating audio and all these kinds of things that you don't do as a real-time execution, as you might say, like, play an instrument for the sake of the recording, then play the instrument on stage. And so the process of adapting for live is always a process of adapting. It's very rarely something where you can kind of do what you did to make the song to play the show. So there's always this kind of way you have to sort of engineer this whole new like system and methodology and craft to get up on stage, essentially. And that involves figuring out how to make it real time, basically.
Yeah, to make it, because it almost is like you record it once for the recording, but then you have to create a different means of not recording, but creating those same sounds for the stage. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that, there were objectives that you felt needed to be what the artists were striving for, or you felt artists were striving for, and that's in particular authenticity and engagement. So do you want to elaborate on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So like authenticity is a really big topic to talk about in terms of music, and there's all kinds of resources and stuff you can sort of like dip into there. But that's like a huge part about performance, especially. One of the like works that I was kind of drawing from a lot was the authenticity as authentication, which by Moore was but like slightly different in the electronic music realm, because that was written a lot for kind of more you might think of as the sort of like, say, the rock or folk, or these kinds of like conventional models of performance. And that's so much of what artists are trying to carry into performance, is trying to like, some element of authenticity. And I was specifically looking at adapting existing works, very much the common scenario of, I made an album, now I'm going on tour. So people are going to want to hear these songs, but, again, we're inventing a whole new way to do them live because this is not how they were created. So you have to be authentic to the songs in some way, shape or form. You have to be authentic to yourself as an artist, what is appropriate for your presentation, your identity as a creative individual. Then some of the other kind of, sorry, getting my notes. And then just, being engaging is like, at the end of the day, you could be incredibly authentic to both these things, perhaps by getting up on stage and pressing play, and look, there's various degrees of that exists in all different realms of music, not exclusively electronic music, but at some way, shape or form, you need to make this a show that people want to pay money to attend. On top of all the concerns of authenticity, making it something that is engaging as well. Yeah.
Certainly. You talked about several artists, and this is where I want to talk about your band, but some of the examples that you talked about, you mentioned Imogen Heap, which I don't think of as electronic music at all. It's just interesting. I don't think of her in that way, but I love the, what is it called? The piano tar?
Oh, the keytar? Yeah, the keytar. I mean, the keytar is a wonderful sort of thing that is probably had its greatest heyday in the 80s or, decades past. But like the keytar is in this kind of framework, or just this sort of conversation, is a under-celebrated thing, because just, keyboards conventionally sit on stands that are flat, and the surface of which faces, the ceiling, and the audience is rarely able to see that well unless they're like, vertically placed above, if you've got like, say, tiered seating at a like concert hall venue or whatever. But this is rarely the format that we get for presentation of electronic music. So as dorky as they might seem, the wonderful thing about a keytar is it copies what a guitar does. It's strapped to your body, it faces the audience, So yes, she was performing with a keytar, and in one of the performances I was reviewing. Yeah.
And you mentioned also the other thing that she did, and I know nothing about this, so you'll have to educate us, but the Mimo gloves, if I'm saying that right?
Yeah, and look, Mimu, I think, was the pronunciation I've heard from Imogen Heap, but like something to that effect. MIMU. They're gesture-based controllers. So they're gloves that send data just as kind of like control messages that could be mapped to whatever you want on things like, the rotation of your hand or the pitch in yaw, and like what fingers are sort of adjusted in what ways. And Imogen Heap was involved in the development of those gesture-based controllers for the exact purpose of performing electronic music live and trying to find more visually engaging ways of performing, because she was sort of unsatisfied with the idea of, say, moving a small fader to create an effect change, and wanted to be able to like do a sweeping arm gesture that was more easily visually read by an audience. And that's a big difficulty that electronic music artists kind of navigate in performance, is like, everybody kind of has the most basic understanding of how a guitar functions, and that you hit string, hold fretboard, make sound. But so much of the equipment that is used in performance isn't as familiar to an audience, and sort of just kind of being able to like engage with it in the sense of like, go like, oh, you're doing things, and I can observe the gesture relationship to sound. And that's one of the things I talked a bit about in their presentation when I talked about being engaging, is that it seems like really what is king there, and what I've kind of found repeated in other research I've read, is that like visual correlation to sound. This is a thing that I just kind of like harp on to my students, is like, visual gesture having a relationship to especially rhythm of sound, so if you see this and then you hear a sweeping kind of movement of sound, it doesn't matter that you don't know, oh, that's a Mimu glove and this is a gesture-based controller. But, you just kind of get the thing relates to the thing, and that's enough.
Yes. And that's something I had not really, I've been in the music industry for my whole life, but it's just, I had not thought of the correlation between gestures on stage and the rhythm of the music, and how much that tells me as an audience member, and how it brings that about. Before we move on, I just want to also talk a bit about the Sleeping Giants, your band, and how this brought you to this particular research project.
Well, the Sleeping Giants is one of the reasons why I kind of got brought to this, but it's something that, like, I've had other projects where I've tried performing in different ways, and it's kind of been something I've thought about for a long time in various guises. The Sleeping Giants is a project with myself and my collaborator, Alex Gooding. We, part of the presentation, I talk a bit about my own work with that outfit as a way, I guess, to kind of bring personal experience to the table, as well as talk about something that lives in a slightly different genre space. We make music that's and everybody hates describing their own music in genres, let alone doing it at an academic conference. But beats, down tempo, like influenced by sort of jazz stuff, hip hop stuff. So Alex plays live on drum kits. I perform with push controllers, which are part of the an interface for Ableton Live. We had to kind of think about this music is, made with instrumental performance, but it's also made with, edited audio and all these kind of non-real-time processes we were talking about. How do we bring this together live? And there's only two of us. So Alex is primarily a drummer as much as he's a talented multi-instrumentalist. So Alex plays drums. I play on push controllers. We sit facing one another as a way to kind of make it this conversation about us. The particular performance I analyzed there, we performed in the round, so the audience could be around us in different places. And just there's so many things I think that kind of you often take as a given about how staging is done in performance and that kind of thing. And even just exploring kind of alternative options of staging, the performers face each other, the audience is around them, and what kind of stuff that opens up for, how you can, for example, incorporate gestures or whatever. Being able to have the audience around us meant that we could face each other and not be worried that we were blocking them out, because they could position themselves in various places and sort of, visually engage with what they chose to, essentially. The way in which that stuff is performed is relevant to the music of that particular project. But I've also had more pop band kind of orientated stuff, or more dance music orientated stuff that, kind of got performed in different ways with different technology. One of the things I kind of said about this idea of being authentic to the creative identity of the artist, one thing I found over and over looking at different artists is that electronic music artists tend to seem to regard themselves basically as tinkerers and inventors. And we basically just like changing things for the sake of changing things. We just want to invent new ways of performing for the sake of it.
Well, and I think that continues to grow the format too. So, I'm going to move on to a couple of our other speakers, but thank you so much. And audience, if you have questions, we're going to take them at the end. So please be submitting those in chat or on, in the chat, and we'll get to them for any of the folks here. So I'm going to say next up, because I'm going to just go in order as it is on the screen, Justin Cincovich and Clayton Smith. Would you guys both mind joining me?
Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys. Well, nice to meet you, first of all, since we haven't officially met. But let me just say a couple of words about you. You both are at Columbia College in Chicago and associate professors in the business and entrepreneurial department, correct?
Okay. That's right.
And I guess, Justin, you are also the associate chair, right?
I am. Yes, okay. It's my first year as associate chair. It's been awesome.
How's the admin world?
It's challenging and fantastic.
All right. So your paper and your presentation is on blockchains, NFT, and the future of content creation and distribution of entertainment. This is so interesting to me and something I've kind of been digging around in and trying to learn, but I feel like I learned so much from this conference in general and your paper. Let me get to your page so I can have my questions in front of me. Sorry for the flipping noise. Okay, so first thing that kind of knocked me back was when you talked about perspectives of the market of the 26 billion globally entertainment, and in 2021 NFTs. I don't want to steal the thunder, but what was that? I
want to say that it was 40 billion, right?
Yeah, and so that kind of just knocks. I mean, at 26 to 40 for NFTs being so new. So I found that fascinating.
Although if you still have that money in the crypto market, it may be back down to 26 billion at this point.
That's very likely.
Interesting facet of the whole ecosystem that NFTs live in.
Well, I guess just if you would, one of you, Clayton, or you, Justin, would like to give kind of just a brief overview of how Bitcoin works. You used an analogy, I believe, of like the spreadsheet. So why don't you talk a moment about that for novices?
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in on that. So yeah, we talk about Bitcoin, which is of course the big popular cryptocurrency that everyone knows. It runs on a blockchain, right? A blockchain network. And that's kind of where our presentation really starts off, is what is blockchain? Because can be really tricky to wrap your mind around it. So all you really need to know about blockchain is that it's basically just a spreadsheet. All it does, it does more than this, but essentially what it does is it just records transactions. And so it just makes a decentralized, ledger. Basically, it says this person did this thing at this time with this other party, right? So if, I buy some Bitcoin, that just gets recorded in the blockchain and it's there. The way that, Bitcoin itself kind of works, again, really, briefly is it's an incentive to be part of the blockchain. Since blockchain is decentralized, it's a bunch of just computers that are totally separate from each other, just on the internet, kind of together, that are approving these ledger entries, right? So the whole system falls apart if there aren't computers doing that. So to incentivize people to put their computers to work doing that, we create Bitcoin. Well, someone created Bitcoin, right? And so the idea is you sustain the blockchain system, and as a reward for that, the other thing that happens while you're connected to that system is your computer mines Bitcoin. So it just solves very complex math problems very slowly, and slowly kind of gives you more essentially money, although the value of that is obviously constantly fluctuating.
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. And I love that analogy, by the way. I love Excel spreadsheets. So I totally got that.
Thank you.
It made perfect sense. So you talked about, I want to talk about the issues that you bring up, that you say that they're addressing. But before we get to the issues, please share with us some of these case studies where artists have used the cryptocurrency or NFTs. In particular, I loved the Aussie one.
That's a fun one. Yeah. I think so my colleague, Jerry Brindisi, a lot of y'all know him from being on the board of MEIEA. We worked with, MEIEA, who goes by Spotty Wi-Fi, so that's one example that really just is one to wrap your head around. And, here's this struggling rapper trying to get in the game and can get much going. And he branded himself as an NFT, a crypto punk that had freckles, and named himself Spotty Wi-Fi due to the freckles. And so he's this avatar on the blockchain, and dropped an EP as Spotty Wi-Fi, and actually collaborated with another one of our colleagues, Alex Fruchter, who is very influential in the hip hop community and was friends with this rapper named Bun B. Bun B dropped a verse on one of his tracks, so that kind of helped, add credibility to the Spotty Wi-Fi project. But Mig, aka Spotty, is very savvy in this space, and in putting together this persona, also did an NFT drop where there were vinyl records. So if you bought the NFT, you got a vinyl record. You got this NFT that was randomized exactly what NFT you would get. There were 2,000 of these. And so some of them had more potential value than others, but there's this element of chance, which I've done presentations here on like gamification of digital media, and a game of chance is a very compelling attribute of motivational psychology as well. So yeah, you saw and of course, one of the most interesting points of this is that this is a total game changer that we've been talking about since I started kind of researching and presenting this back in 2019. The fact that Spotty Wi-Fi gave his buyers of these NFTs the right to license this music, sync license it to, to television, to film, to commercials, to games. And so you're licensing this with the purchase, but then Mig or Spotty can still earn royalties off of that resale, that sub licensing. And that's what we're seeing as well, is you can bake into these smart contracts the fact that if it's a digital piece of art that you sell to them once and they resell it, you can still get royalties. You can still get a piece of that action. And that's, again, baked into the smart contract on the blockchain. And that's really exciting. So he made, our colleague Alex wrote an article about this in Complex Magazine, if you want to check it out. He made 200K, 200 grand in, I think, that week or that day. I don't really remember, but it's an exciting way to, and we just had another student who Clayton is really close to, Elise Swope. She just sold an NFT for 200K, right? So there are those moments where we can monetize things in these new ways, in this emerging, exciting, wild, wild west-esque landscape.
Yeah, and it is. And I feel like I've been calling the music business a wild, wild west for 20 years, but I think we're just stuck here. It's just, this is where we're going to be for the rest of the time. Let's talk about, you mentioned a company called Vest, where you can put your music up, and it's sort of crowdfunding. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a new type of model, right, for crowdfunding, and crowdfunding itself is, of course, pretty new also in terms of how we do it, use platforms to do it. But so it's an evolving thing. But to me, it's really exciting because it represents a totally new way to fund musical projects, right? Fund bands, fund artists, fund creation. So the idea behind platforms like Vest, and there are several of them out there, is basically you as a music enthusiast, or just someone who just wants to support artists. You can go onto their platform, and you can contribute money basically to help them, reach whatever their goal is, to create an album, or to go on tour, or to help market one particular song, whatever it is that they're looking for money for. You can go and you can contribute to that. And because of the smart contract that's available on the blockchain, when you do that, you get some sort of ownership of that song or that tour or whatever project you're helping support. So you put in $100 to help them put together this album. Then maybe you own, 0.5% or however much of the royalties that come from that album. So that's all, that's all in the contract. And so you get to actually reap the benefits of supporting the artists that you're really interested in. So you can go find new artists, you can support them with actual money, you can make them create or help them create their actual work. But then unlike traditional crowdfunding, it's not, then the artist doesn't have to then say, okay, what are your perks, right? The perks are baked into the contract, and the perks are you get to split some of this money, and it happens automatically. It's one of the other really nice things about blockchain being decentralized. Those smart contracts kick in. A transaction happens, someone buys a song on Vest or whatever platform it's on, and that money instantly is going to go, or near instantly goes to all the investors, and it's there, it's in their wallets, and there's no middleman. They don't have to wait, a week for the banks to figure out how to communicate with each other. It just happens instantly. So you get to actually benefit from helping people create the art that they're trying to create.
Okay. And I found that so interesting that I love the whole royalty type NFT idea. I don't know that it's a huge revenue right now, but I see that can become something. And I think it's the idea of ownership in that realm. It feels more connected to your artist. So I love that. We're about out of time, but I just want to bring up the 3 issues that you guys had mentioned in your talk that are being addressed in the NFT world. And that is obviously the environmental issue, and then the security, the hacking possibilities, both of which you said are being addressed. But then talk a moment just about the bubble, Is it not? Is this a burst or not?
Hey, I mean, I think that, so as we alluded to in our presentation, I was in the early, so Napster, the original version of Napster, asked me and my partners in my company to incubate them. We were in a music startup back in 1999, one of the first ones ever. We were millionaires for a while, then we were not millionaires at all. And, because a lot of that was on paper. I think we're seeing, that was 99, 2000, 2001. That's when the bubble burst, that I was in digital music. That was pre-iTunes, et cetera. Then really there was just this dead space from everybody getting burned so bad and during that time. And then when Apple launched iTunes, everything, digital music became monetizable to, the normal public got used to this way of transacting things through e-commerce. So is this another bubble that the world's not quite ready for? And is it too all over the place? And is it going to crash and burn with potentially a recession coming up here? And that, we're seeing this huge adjustment in the crypto market, et cetera. Quite possibly. But I think what I would argue, I think Clayton would argue too, and then many other people that have been studying and working in this space, even if there is a big correction, the blockchain and this way of decentralizing commerce and information and organizations, creating organizations completely on the blockchain, et cetera, I think that's here to stay, and we're going to see it sustain itself, and it could be potentially the same as when the internet started, when e-commerce first started. And I don't know about you, I just find this incredibly interesting and compelling, but I also would love to capture a little bit of that money as it takes off personally.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind that either. So, well, thank you both. I hang around. We're going to take questions at the end. And next up is Robert Wiley. If I'm pronouncing your name right, Robert, and I apologize if not. Is it Wiley?
It's Willie, but I answer to both.
Okay.
Then,
well, I saw the other L in there, and I almost said Willie, but it was like, I don't know. Okay, so you are with Ball State University. You're a teacher, an author, a producer. It sounds like you've got your hands in a whole lot of things. And your paper topic is value for value, crowdsourcing with Bitcoin, which kind of segues from where we just were. So you were talking about podcasting, though, in particular, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So in crowdsourcing, break that down for me, because I wasn't sure I got it. So crowdsourcing in podcasting. So is this utilizing the crowdsourcing mechanism to create podcast, or is it also a music element within that too?
Well, there's podcasting, and now there's podcasting 2.0. So with podcasting 2.0, there's some new tags that have added new features. And then along with that is the concept of the creators, Adam Curry, and of using value for value, which is a kind of crowdsourcing approach that they ask people to follow for their listeners. They give away their content, and then they ask the listeners to decide how much the content is worth to them, and then put a number to that and send it to them. And so they've pioneered this value for value approach, and that's baked into podcasting 2.0. And you can send in your value in several different ways, but the way that they prefer it is through Bitcoin. And so part of this last couple of years of relaunching podcasting with new features is to use the Lightning Network so that you can have micropayments. If you did it through regular Bitcoin, small amounts of money that you might send would be eaten up by the fees. So there's a second layer of it, the Lightning Network, and that's how the payments are routed through Lightning.
And on the value for value exchange, didn't I understand that in addition to actual monetization, there's also an exchange of services at times? Yeah. They call them producers to send them whatever number you put to it. So maybe you
decide that if, comparing it to the price of a movie that might be $50 for you and your friend and a tub of popcorn, put a number to what their 3-hour podcast has been worth. Maybe it's worth $2 to you, maybe it's worth $10. And then to send that to them as time, treasure, or talent, the 3 T's. The treasure would be the Bitcoin or the PayPal or the check to their post office box. But they also do benefit from the time and talent of their listeners. So in the case of the No Agenda show, they have their listeners, they call them producers. They say that this producers who are sending in the clips and the jingles and the artwork and all. There's people who operate their servers. There's people who have set up user groups and reunions among their fans. So there's all sorts of people working behind the scenes to help them. That makes it all possible. They wouldn't be able to make such a media-rich show if they didn't have the time and talent in addition to the treasure of their listeners.
Yeah, it takes a village. So there were so many things you mentioned, and all of them are relatively new to me. I'll acknowledge, but a couple of the things that you discussed was the Curiocasters.
Yes.
So talk about that a moment.
All right.
So if and all of that. Yeah.
If you're interested in seeing the new features in podcasting, you'd want to go to newpodcastapps.com. That's where they have a list of the new apps and all the different features that they're bringing on. Curiocaster is one of those new apps that functions in Podcasting 2.0. So it's got chapter arts. It's got the opportunity to send boosts and tips and stream money to the listeners and album art and all these goodies. Curiocaster runs in a browser. So if you go to curiocaster.com, you can try out Podcasting 2.0 without installing a new podcasting app.
Got it. Okay. And I'm going to apologize to both you and Annie. This 40 minutes goes really quick, but I only have about 7 minutes left. And your information was so incredibly interesting. I encourage all of the audience to please go check it out. I feel like I learned so much, and podcasting is something I'm really interested in doing myself, honestly. So thank you so much. Please stick around, and we're going to try to squeeze in some questions right at the end.
If I could just put in one comment. In the video, I made a mistake. I've made a website that outlines my process and the things I've learned. It's musiccasting.org, not musiccasting.com, musiccasting.org. And you can find out about it's an onboarding site to help musicians run their business this way. Thank you. Thank
you so much. I appreciate that. And next up, and last but not least, is Annie Johnson. And Annie, is that your preferred? Me to refer to you as Annie, or do you prefer Andre? Or Andre?
It's actually Ani, like Ani DeFranco.
Ani DeFranco. I should have known that. Ani. Okay. Thank you. All right. So you are an associate professor of music business at Berkeley, and we're going to stay in this tech track that we've been traveling in. But your presentation has what I think is one of the best presentations named WTF or NFTs. And I think we're all saying that much today. So it's a music business primer on Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, tokens, and all things in that digital realm. So you mentioned several different platforms and modes of engagement in here. I guess let's start with, is it Algorand? Am I saying that correctly?
Algorand, yeah. So Algorand is a DAO, and that is a decentralized autonomous organization. And that means that the Algorand, you can build all kinds of dApps. So that's what we call apps on the blockchain. And so you've seen there, one of the ones that I talked about was Run DMC. And he just released a song, an NFT that contained a song and a digital moving picture. And fractional ownership of his song. And so they airdropped that at South by Southwest to the fans that were there. And then he was, I actually went up, I didn't go to South by Southwest, but I went up and I was able to connect my wallet, my digital wallet. They have a wallet called Para that I had to use. And then it sent shares of the tokens that he dropped, that he had also dropped at South by Southwest. So I also am now owning a part of that, which is very exciting. And it doesn't say exactly what those tokens are going to do yet, but we all have a piece of that through that NFT.
Okay, and that was it's A Million Scars, right?
A Million Scars by DMC.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, which I thought that was, first of all, to take an artist that was so influential in the onset of rap and had so much to now be in this, I thought was really interesting too. So,
and he's my age, so he's been around since the 80s and was killing it in the 80s and is killing it now.
Still doing it. He's still playing. Yeah. We'll talk about also another thing you mentioned that I found really interesting was STOI.
STOI, yeah. So STOI was created in part by my colleague George Howard, and this is where they were trying to allow DIY artists to get into the NFT space. And so if you go to the song that owns itself, and it's STOI.org, you can go on there and you can see all the STOIs that they have. And basically, again, that allows you to own, or not own it, you own the NFT, which includes sometimes artwork, sometimes it includes music, and sometimes it includes fractional shares of the copyright, so that when that song gets placed in a sync license, and that sync license makes money, you actually, as an early investor, would make money. In this case, they're giving tokens, and those tokens are allowing you to do other things in the space, to buy merch, to go to concerts, gives you access sometimes to their private Discord chat with the artist. So all of these tokens that are a part of these NFTs are allowing the fan to engage in different ways. So get closer to that artist, which is what we want to know, like what did they eat for breakfast? But it's more than that. It's really trying to give back to the early adopters and to the fans that are maybe even sharing information on their socials, spreading the word and being like an influencer and spreading that marketing information for that artist.
Yeah, I find, and just to kind of bring it full circle, it's interesting. You refer to the engagement of the fans, and that's what we started out talking about. So I don't think we're ever going to get away from the need to engage our fan, and not my fan, but our music from the people.
Yes, because they want to be a part of our creativity. They maybe don't have that within themselves, and so to feel like they are part of that creative process or caught up in the fun of that music, that's what it always goes back to.
Yeah. Tell me one other thing. You too referenced Imogene Heap in what you and some of your I think Creative Passport, but what I had not heard of, and perhaps I'm the rarity, maybe more people have heard of this, but the standard setting organization for the entertainment in the digital value chain. So talk about it. It's DDEX, is that right?
DDEX. Yeah, and I was just at Music Biz in Nashville this last week, and I listened to several of their presentations, and of course they went deep and talked about the naming conventions. How are we trying to unify across the music industry space worldwide with these naming conventions, so that when we pull in data about a song, who's the author and who are the producers and who wrote the liner notes and all of that, that we have some way that we are standardizing it, so that when you pull it into your own unique database, that you don't have to spend a lot of time cleaning up the data, because we talk about dirty data, and that's where, there might be something that maybe isn't standard. Trying to think of what that might be, because we look at lyrics, we look at BPM, we look at publishers, and who is the owner of the SR copyright, and there might be something about that artist. So somebody that they used last week was their favorite shoes, and so maybe you want to know all of the brands that artist endorses. Although that's not something that we typically look at, and that would be data that you might receive, and then what do you do with that? So DDEX is really trying to set the standards across the industry, so that when all of this is put in any media, that information is there, so that you know who the creators are, you know who to pay. And you don't have to kind of do what Spotify unfortunately had to do with DIY artists, is they had to go back and then talk to everybody and say, well, what's your address? How do I pay you for your streams? When they first talked with all of the majors, the majors were actually investors in Spotify. And so they got that dump of data, and they got how they wanted it coded, and they knew all of the payers and payees. But, when we are talking about DIY artists, this is more difficult. There's millions and billions of us, and we've got to find a way to inform and educate those DIY artists how to get their music ready to be, brought into these platforms so that they can get their content paid for. This is also the problem the MLC is having. I was in Cannes in 2013 and was speaking with a lot of different people worldwide that were trying to figure this out. And so DDEX finally got it done, finally found a way for us to have unifying standards.
Well, I think that's great, because as you just said, we've been dealing with that in the digital space and, metadata issues. So I love that there is a forward-thinking organization trying to get ahead of this before it's the problem that it has been. Well, we're about out of time, and I only have one question, really. So could I invite everyone back? I think you guys all covered things so well, but there was a question, and this again, I think it kind of sits with most of you. The question from the audience is, who among you, and I'll just ask you guys, who among you has bought an NFT? Kelly, I know you said you had. Okay. Yeah, I'm out too. I've not. I've looked at them, but I've not actually gotten the wallet yet. So it'd be really curious. Maybe we can do a poll with our attendees to just see who is actually in the space right now, because obviously we're in that learning curve where we're still trying to get our heads around it. So it's still going from there. But thank you all so very much. This flew by. It's such interesting information. And again, I encourage everyone, if they've not watched your videos, please do. They're all very, very interesting and very informative. So I believe we're out of time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.